Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Krown Gridiron Nation. Mike's in Toronto, Gord is in Vancouver, and while Jim is on sick leave, I'm Darren DuPont, and honored to be with you here on the show, and honored to bring you the 2-minute warning. This show is about USPORTS and NCAA football, so why not feature a game that features both? They've waited 12 years in BC for the return of the Shrum Bowl. Simon Fraser and UBC high on top of Burnaby Mountain in clear 0-degree weather. It took 3 quarters for the offenses to warm up. It was 6-3 UBC heading into the final frame. To open it up, SFU quarterback Justin Sieber connecting long distance with Ethan Bissell. 55 yards later, it's 10-6 Red Leafs. 3 minutes later, UBC take advantage of an SFU turnover. Dane Kapler capping the drive with a 17-yard run. T-Birds regain the lead, 12-10. The real fun stuff happens inside the 2-minute warning. Sieber and the Leafs engineering an 8-play, 91-yard drive with this Mason Glover 2-yard run. 1:34 left on the clock, and SFU up by 5. But UBC's next drive would go one better. Quarterback Derek Angle working the field and the clock. 12 plays, 65 yards, and then the quarterback calling his own number for the touchdown. The 2-point conversion failed. UBC up 18-17. 24 seconds left. Sieber on the final play, sacked for the 13th time by that UBC defense. Game over. Playing their rules at their stadium, the UBC Thunderbirds are Shrum Bowl champions. We'll have more on the Shrum Bowl coming up a little bit later on in the show. Now time to check out the 5 finalists for the Cornish Trophy, awarded annually to the top Canadian in NCAA football. Illinois junior running back Chase Brown from London, Ontario was durable, reliable, and productive in 2022. 1,643 rushing yards, second in the NCAA, and his second consecutive 1,000-yard season. He was the leader in rushing in the NCAA until the final week, and would follow in the footsteps of another running back who won the Cornish Trophy in Chuba Hubbard of Oklahoma State. But Gord, these two running backs are very different, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And, Chase Brown, I think a little bit more of a compact package than Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard, big, long, striding runner, a guy that, had that home run speed when he hit the open field. Chase Brown is able to be a little bit more of a grinder and sticks up between the tackles. And that doesn't mean he can't bust big plays, but it does mean that he's a very different style of runner and frankly, one that I think might have more immediate utility in the NFL than Chuba Hubbard did. Chuba's actually done pretty well lately since the trade of Christian McCaffrey in Carolina, but his rookie year, it took him a little bit to find his stride, and even still, he's kind of a timeshare guy. I think Chase Brown's a guy that could be more of an early down type of runner rather than Hubbard, who's more of a long yardage guy if you're looking for a big explosive play. So it'll be interesting to see, but it's been great to see Brown emerge this season and really lock himself in as a legitimate NFL prospect.
Yeah, I think the great thing about Chase Brown this year, and I don't know if he was a prohibitive favorite for the Cornish before the season started, but whatever expectations we had, he surpassed. He did not get to the almost 2,100 yards that Chuba Hubbard had in his biggest year in the NCAA, but came close, with a decent game, a below average game for him this year. He'll pass Tim Biakabatuka from Michigan for, another milestone for a Canadian running back. He's already passed guys, in the past, some big names who have put up really big seasons as a running back in the NC2A. But, the things that have impressed me the most, I think, about Brown this year, and we've talked about it on this show and talked about it before the season, was the consistency and the durability. I didn't think he was going to get the ball as much as he did this year. And the amount of touches he had, and to be able to maintain the consistency that he did, 5-yard average per carry, and to end up with the yardage that he did, and not wear down really. Maybe he did the last game, although he didn't have the same kind of carries. 10 times he hit 100 yards, another time he hit 98, and the only other game was the last game of the season against Northwestern, where he had the 61, and put the Roger Maris asterisk next to that one because it was his lowest output. But man, he just is so much fun to watch, and if he was a favorite going in, I don't know if he's a prohibitive favorite because, there's a quarterback in Ohio had a pretty good year as well, but in my books, he's going to get my vote. I just thought he had a dynamite season.
The Mid-American Conference Player of the Year in 2022 was Ohio junior quarterback Curtis Rourke of Oakville, Ontario. He was 5th in the nation in passing until sustaining a knee injury in Ohio's second-to-last game, finishing with 3,256 yards passing, good for 20th in the NCAA. The Heisman has become a quarterback award, but only one quarterback has won this award. That's Curtis's brother, Nathan Rourke, who won it the first 2 times. Mike, why is Curtis deserving of the Cornish Trophy this time around?
Well, he's had a spectacular season, especially for a quote-unquote Canadian quarterback. You know, he's top 20 in terms of overall passing despite the injury. And, you know, there's another game plus that he would have been able to put up some numbers. But when you look at his performance in terms of completion percentage and quarterback rating and average yards per attempt, he's in the top 10 and in the top 5 in a couple of those categories. So he's had a really exceptional season. MVP in the MAC and most outstanding player in the MAC. And, you know, he did all of the things that he was expected to do and then some. He's coming out of a pretty substantial shadow cast by his brother, not only at Ohio, but maybe that shadow became a little bit longer with the way that Nathan started the season with the BC Lions this year. So, you know, he had really high expectations and I think surpassed basically all of them.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, to me, the key statistic that stands out, you know, he throws for 25 touchdowns. He adds 3 more touchdowns on the ground, so 27 total touchdowns versus just 4 interceptions. That is a fantastic job of taking care of the football and working within an offensive system. And I got to believe the Ohio coaches were absolutely thrilled with what he did, not just because he put up numbers, but because he put up safe numbers. And I don't mean safe like conservative. I mean safe like he picked his spots and then he ruthlessly executed them. And I mean, that's what leads you to an MVP performance. It's really just a shame for this Ohio team. You know, they ended up losing the MAC championship last week. And I would say there's a pretty strong argument that they likely do win that championship if Rourke is still in the game. So a little bit of a drawback there for them. And it'll be interesting to see, like, does Curtis Rourke run it back again at Ohio? Does he try to look for a bigger platform like so many players are doing this year? I know we've had that talking point on this program before. Wherever he ends up, though, I mean, he's going to be must-watch TV next year with another year starting experience under his belt, and a guy that at about 1.5 inches, 2 inches taller than his brother probably has more legitimate NFL potential coming straight out of NCAA than his brother, who had to kind of prove himself in the CFL before getting real interest. So that'll be an interesting dynamic to watch next year as well.
Still ahead on the program, more finalists for the Cornish Trophy. It's Krown, Gridiron Nation, here on TSN. Welcome back to the program. I'm Darren DuPont. We're looking at the 5 finalists for the Cornish Trophy. Let's jump back in. The former Guelph Griffin, who transferred during the pandemic, senior D lineman Tavius Robinson has been a force to be reckoned with at Ole Miss in 2022. Always capable of making a game-changing play in the interior of the line. A defensive player has never won this award, although OK State's Eamon Ogbong-Bamiga did actually receive more first-place votes than eventual winner John Mechie III did in 2020. Gord, besides making impact plays on the field, who is Tavius Robinson, the football player?
Well, Tavius Robinson, the football player, is a long athlete with some explosion off the line of scrimmage and a really good motor. And one of the challenges for him, if he's going to be an NFL guy, is he's going to probably need to add some weight to his frame. His official listed weight is only 245, which at 6'7" means that you're pretty skinny in the britches if you're going to be an NFL defensive lineman. And you're also not built to be a linebacker at 6'7". So if he's going to give it a legitimate go in the NFL, I do think he's going to want to pack some weight, a little bit of weight onto that frame and get himself up over the 250 mark. A lot of these guys these days, even if they're just situational third down pass rushers, are carrying that 250, 260 type of weight to come off the edge, or they don't quite have the length that Robinson does. So I do think in order to be able to hold up against the run at the NFL level, he's going to have to pack some weight onto that frame. But that being said, he uses his long levers really effectively. 5 sacks this season, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. So you alluded to the knack for the big play, but a lot of that is the way that he uses that length and the way that he attacks people with his hands. And that has been one of the most impressive parts about Tavius this year. So there's a lot to like there.
Peterborough, Ontario senior Jared Wayne was the top target at Pitt this year, another top Canadian who lost some playing time due to injury. Wayne rallied towards season's end, eclipsing the 1,000-yard mark. Jared Wayne looking to become just the second receiver to win the Cornish Trophy. Alabama Crimson Tide wideout and Houston Texan John Mechie won it the last 2 years. Your thoughts, Mike, on Wayne's consistency?
Well, he'd be consistent if he was healthy. I mean, that seemed to be the problem, and that was kind of an up and down season, to be honest. But here's a guy who lost his quarterback last year. Kenny Pickett goes to the NFL, and then lost the #1 receiver last year as Addison transfers to USC, and all of a sudden he becomes the #1 guy with a new quarterback. And he wasn't the best out of the gate. I think we had, at least on this program, we had lofty expectations, and he finally started to get there. And again, like Tavius Robinson, saving his best until the last game of the season when they go and play Miami, and I don't mean of Ohio, I mean the U. They go into Miami. He ends up with a bunch of catches, over 200 yards in receiving, and 3 touchdowns. And he just seemed, again, to get better and more confident as the season went. And maybe that's just getting used to a new QB. And, he had the injury problems midway through the season that cost him a game, and a game and a half, I guess, after he got walloped pretty hard in a game in mid-September. So, yeah, he's a guy who, is very deserving of being one of the finalists for this award.
Thoroughly productive and consistent in his 5 years with the Fighting Illini. London, Ontario super senior Sidney Brown turned in his best year in the Illinois secondary. He's turned the heads of NFL scouts with 6 picks and stats in just about every defensive category. A Cornish Trophy would be the crowning glory for one of Canada's best ever college defensive backs. Yes, he's the twin brother of Chase, but is Sidney Brown the Canadian with the most pro potential in this upcoming draft season, Gord?
It's possible that he does, although I will mention another one in the next segment here that might have more pro potential than he does. But Sidney Brown's been nothing short of fantastic this year, and it's been a really impressive secondary performance for Illinois this year, as Witherspoon, the cornerback, also is a guy that's skyrocketing up draft boards. But one of the things that we saw indications of in previous years from Sidney Brown, but really blossomed this year, was his ability to make big game-changing plays. 6 interceptions on the year for Sidney Brown, plus a forced fumble recovery as well. He also recorded a sack this year. So versatility is a great word to describe what Sidney Brown can do defensively. And prior to this year, he felt like more of a box safety type of guy. He was a decent coverage guy, but he was a guy that was more of a chase down the ball, rack up a lot of tackles type of secondary player. And while that's really helpful to winning football games, there's also limited utility there. This year, all of a sudden, he turns into a ball hawk with the 6 interceptions, and also shows a flair for making big plays off of those when he has the ball in his hands. Really, I could not have asked for more from Sidney Brown this season, and I suspect it looks pretty comfortable that he has a good shot at being in day 2 of the draft, which is rounds 2 and 3 this year, which would be fantastic for him.
Yeah, I don't know if he's the best player this year, but he might be my favorite. And the reason is simple. He reminds me a lot of Eamon Ogbogbemiga, because when people will tune in to watch Chase Brown, all of a sudden, hey, his brother's on this team too, and he's really good. And it was kind of like when we were looking at Chuba Hubbard and Ogbogbemiga was kind of jumping off the screen at us. And Sidney Brown's had that kind of last couple of years, certainly, at Illinois, and he plays so well downhill. He is such a good guy in run support from the back end. And, we talked about it, Gord, right off the top of the season. Our concern in terms of maybe getting more attention for this award was he going to be able to get those interceptions, and he answered with a resounding yes. And having the pick 6 and a 50-plus yard fumble recovery for a touchdown in the same game, and like we talked about Robinson and we talked about Wayne, Brown finished the season with his best game of the season, at least statistically, so to this point. So, yeah, he's just been a joy to watch, and the coaches know it. He's not all Big Ten for a reason, and the Senior Bowl wants to see him. He was invited down there, and that's a really good cherry on top of an excellent Sunday of a season for Sidney Brown.
Quickly, provide me each with one honorable mention who didn't make the 5, starting with Mike.
I'll go defense and I'll go line because the guys on the line never get the love they deserve. And Akeem Messidor down at Miami, you know, we talked about him at the beginning of the season as a guy with great potential to have that monster year. And, you know, going to a new school, a new surrounding with the transfer portal and going down to Miami, again, the U. He had a pretty good season. You know, we've given Tavius Robinson one of the 5 finalist spots, and Messidor was close. He ended up with 7 sacks this season, which is a really tasty number, and in a lot of years, Canadian with 7 sacks in the NCAA playing at a Power 5 conference would have gotten a lot more attention than he did. Maybe we had our expectations a little too high for him, but I think he had a hell of a season, and a 3.5 sack game against Virginia Tech this year. He had a really good year. Top 5, maybe borderline, kind of, sort of, but certainly worthy of the honorable mention here.
Yeah, you wonder if Messidor is maybe a bit of a victim of the fact that his overall defense was pretty dreadful for the second half of the year this year. And unfortunately, it's tough to kind of stand out above the crowd when you're a defensive guy and your defense is just getting gashed left and right. And another guy that I think has maybe been a victim of his team's relevancy falling off over the last few weeks has been Matthew Bergeron. And, we were building him up quite a bit in the midpoint of the season. Syracuse was one of the great surprises in the country, moved well into the top 25, took Clemson right to the wire, and Bergeron performed admirably well against that Clemson front that has maybe 3 first-round picks on the defensive line. And so that was kind of the peak of us paying attention to Matthew Bergeron, but quietly he's continued his ascent. He is appearing to be quite a favorite in NFL draft circles, and so I alluded to this earlier that Sidney Brown might be the guy with the best pro potential of this group, but Matthew Bergeron probably is the guy of this group that goes highest in the NFL draft this year, at least at this point in time. That's what it appears to look like. So a guy that I think you'll definitely be seeing playing on Sundays, and a guy who's been really, really impressive, plugging away at a position that doesn't always get the love unless there happens to be an ex-offensive lineman on TV.
Coming up, perhaps the most unique bowl game on the entire planet. Welcome back to KGN, everybody. I'm Darren DuPont. SFU versus UBC. NCAA versus USPORTS in the Shrum Bowl. It's the last game of the season on the Canadian college football calendar. There's plenty of talk about the Panda game on this show, but the Shrum Bowl is different. Gord, what does this game mean to football in BC?
As somebody who was still in high school, or just freshly out of high school the last time a Shrum Bowl was played, I feel like there was a lot of I didn't really know what I missed until it came back. And in experiencing it this past weekend, it was very clear that this is an event that has kind of an unparalleled ability to bring together the football community. There's already a lot of buzz within the circles around here, both SFU and UBC affiliates, of potentially tying it to the high school finals, having it at BC Place because people feel like they can sell that out, or I should say fill out the stadium, not sell it out, excuse me. And the environment up there was fantastic. SFU gets a great showcase event for their new stadium. I talked to SFU head coach Mike Rigel yesterday, and I said, that's the first time I've seen that stadium and it looked fantastic. He goes, well, that's the first time we've seen that stadium like that as well, and it was great. And they were disappointed with the ending to that game, but the crowd itself was really engaged, I thought, maybe well lubricated as well to try and keep warm. It was pretty cold up there, but everybody was in good spirits on both sides. There was some healthy chanting back and forth. Like it was that healthy level of hate. And one of the things with UBC when I was playing there, when we didn't have Shrum Bowl, there wasn't really a rivalry that stood out above the rest for UBC. I mean, there's dislike amongst the entirety of the Canada West, but there wasn't really that kind of natural, crosstown rivalry hatred, something along the lines of, not that it's crosstown, but Queens Western. That dynamic just didn't exist when I was at UBC, and if we can bring this back and continue to build on this, I think it just adds that extra element for both programs to continue to push them forward.
Well, it's just interesting watching one team try to figure out how to run its offense in the other team's building, on the other team's field, with the other team's rules. And if we get this going forward to rotate, which is a plan for next year, I think that's fantastic. It's an advertisement for Canadian football when we as U Sports fans especially are just dying to see U Sports get publicity. So anything you can do in the Lower Mainland to try and get some attention on U Sports or the NCAA in this case, I think it's fantastic. There's nothing wrong. If I could make one small adjustment, I'd do it at the beginning of the season. Use it as an exhibition game for both teams. I know that might screw up one team before the season as they're trying to get ready for their own schedule if they have to go and play a preseason game using another team's rules. But I don't want to say disrespectful, but the fact that it happens after Vanier, after the Grey Cup, it stands alone and it probably helps in terms of publicity. But I find it weird that there's an exhibition game after a national championship.
Coming up next on the program, it's the picks of the week. Our NCAA picks of the week. So just one game and one game only. And Jim tells me it's the favorite game of the season for our sponsor, Mr. Krown Produce. No NILs or transfers here. It's Army-Navy in the final game of the season.
Yeah, and probably, unfortunately, the last time you'll see both of these teams this season, as neither of them appears destined for a bowl game. Army coming in at 5-6, Navy at 4-7, and this game will be kind of like when the Falcons and Bears played in the NFL a couple weeks ago, in that nobody's going to bother throwing the ball, and you're going to see lots of running. Both these teams run triple option based offenses, which is one of the unique aspects of this game that makes it so entertaining every year. It's grinded out, and then all of a sudden somebody will put it over the top for their first pass of the game for a 40-yard touchdown, and all of a sudden you're like, what just happened? And so it's a very unique brand of football that both these teams bring, and it's a very unique atmosphere in the stands with all the cadets from both sides lining the sidelines. The President of the United States is always there, all that kind of stuff. So it should be a really interesting affair, and I would be remiss if I didn't note the other star of this game for aesthetics nerds like myself, which is the uniforms. They've already been revealed. You can go look them up. There's a space-themed uniform for Navy. There's a North African campaign-themed uniform for Army. They both look awesome. Really looking forward to that dynamic too.
If you like passing concepts, do not watch this game. Go play Madden instead. The late, great Chris Triantafilou, the former head coach at Waterloo, once said a perfect game for him was 0 passes. And the Greek might get his wish in this game. Neither one of them averages 100 yards per game passing the football. Army right now is a team that runs the football well. They're over 300 yards a game rushing the football. They're number 2 in the country in terms of rushing the football. And Navy's over 200 yards a game rushing. They don't throw. They don't care. All they want to do is run the option and run it down the other team's throat. If you like good old-fashioned, we're not going to throw, we're just going to run, we're going to dominate you physically football, boy, are you in for a treat. If not, watch the pregame ceremonies. They're awesome. And then leave and go play Madden.
It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you today on the show, but next week, hoping Jim's back in the chair because we've got a big show. It's bowl previews and the winner of the Cornish Trophy. Thanks for watching.